Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm so proud of all of you getting your praise on for God. That's what we're supposed to do. And with our joyous spirit and the soul-inspiring prayer that we do, we help elevate not only those of us here in this room in our own being, but the world as well. This Shabbat, sometimes the Parshat for this Shabbat and next Shabbat, when we have our Saturday service, is a combined Parshat. But because, the Jewish calendar moves around so much, we have to actually spread it out a little bit so that we don't end up with Hanukkah at Passover or Hanukkah at, earlier in the year at Rosh Hashanah. So to keep things straight, this year we have 2 months of Adar, and we separate out the ones that normally are sometimes combined. So this is also Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So those of you that have done Hebrew, Rosh the head, and Chodesh new, it's the head. Every month there's Rosh Chodesh, it's the head of a new month, but this is actually the beginning of the year. That's right. Many people think that our new year is when we get those lovely Jewish calendars and it starts then, but and those of you that are learned, that have been studying, know that actually it starts now, right in the month of Nisan, because we became a people in this month. So this is the beginning, actually, of the Hebrew calendar, and this is the first month of the Hebrew year. This week, in reading, we have Tazria. Next week is Metzorah. Whenever we have B'nai Mitzvah students, or even adult B'nai Mitzvah students, nobody wants to get these portions because they're all about leprosy and little boils and things that can happen to you. And I actually told my husband, I ended up reading it to my daughter, because I decided there's something called Sara'at that we get. I decided to merge, because what do I do up here? I take the Torah and I make it valid to our lives. So I have merged this concept of dis-ease and things that you can be afflicted with, for example, like these boils or blisters or leprosy, with what happened at the Academy Awards with Will Smith. Now, for some, they might think this is a stretch, but for me, it's very logical. So we have first some education so that you have a knowledge of what we're dealing with. These two portions deal with the physio-spiritual plague of Sara'at. Can you say it? Sara'at. It's a discoloration that appears in varying forms on the human skin, on hair, on clothing, and even the walls of somebody's home. The afflicted person must endure a very complicated process of purification in order to be able to rejoin the community. So they are placed outside the community. That's where you get that idea of a leper. And then they have to go through this purification process, and then the Kohen has to inspect them and give them permission to come back. The Kohen, the high priest, must verify and affirm their actual purity to be able to re-enter. The Talmud explains that Sara'at is a divine punishment for the sins, I know you all love this, of Lashon Hara, slander, and gossip. It comments that the reason the afflicted is sent out of the camp is because he separated, or she, friends and families through his words, or her words, and deserves to be separated from the community. Rashi and the Rambam explain that the very first form of Sara'at doesn't even begin on the person. Hashem in his mercy strikes inanimate objects, one's possessions. The discoloration first appears on the walls of a home, forcing the affected stones to be removed and destroyed. If that does not succeed as a wake-up call, the person continues their malicious gossip or their malevolent activities, then the clothing is affected. How many of you ever gotten mold on your clothing? How many of you ever gotten mold on their walls in their homes, or any kind of thing where you had to rip apart a house? These things happen. So people kind of worry when they hear this parsha. if you get a cold sore. You know, I've had B'nai Mitzvah students come up to me and say, around the time of this Parsha, do I have Sarah? And I'm like, I'm so glad you know this. So anyway, if you look at all this, and if that fails, then eventually the flesh is transformed and white little lesions appear, forcing the affected person to leave the Jewish camp until the plague subsides and the Kohen declares them acceptable to return. Rashi tells us that the very first stage, that stage of Sara'at, the home, is actually a blessing in disguise. Sara'at on a home can indeed bring fortune to the affected, which is kind of ironic. As the Israelites were approaching the land of Canaan, the inhabitants, figuring that one day they would come back to reconquer the land, hid all of their gold and their silver and their prized possessions inside the walls of their homes. When one dislodges the afflicted stones of the house, they would then find hidden treasures that were left by the fleeing Canaanites. Now, it is interesting that we, as a people, celebrate Am Yisrael, our peoplehood, the nation of Israel, right at the time of this Parsha of Sara'at. Why? Especially now. We must look at who we are, what we say, how we conduct ourselves, the choices we make in dealing with each other, lest we become afflicted. First our buildings, then ourselves personally. Do we gossip? Do we ever speak ill of others? Are we greedy? We are meant to take care and be mindful. For the Israelites, working through the affliction and then replacing stones in the walls could actually reveal great hidden treasure. Because God afflicted inanimate objects first, moving on to us only after we did not listen. These days, the process we must go through to cleanse ourselves of negative thoughts and behavior reveals a different sort of treasure, a renewal of purity and promise and purpose. What will it take for us to listen so that we will not be afflicted? Remember, what goes around eventually comes around, if not even in just this lifetime, then beyond. Our world is hanging in the balance of a potential impending war. Chaos is everywhere. This was even evident in this year's Academy Awards. Will Smith, many of you have probably seen it, after slapping Chris Rock, was told by Denzel Washington, at your highest point, that is when the devil comes after you. In a New York Times article, Wesley Morris writes, "This pandemic is still killing us. The virus at its center is one of the body, but it's also costing us our minds, a sacked Capitol building, an invaded and decimated sovereign nation, a raft of refugee crises, more American murders, overdoses, mental health issues, harassment for being Asian, for being Black, for being trans, for being Jewish." On Sunday, a couple of hours before the 94th Academy Awards, I watched a man drive the wrong direction down my one-way street, and he wasn't in reverse. His car moved with confidence, with joy, as if this was the way it should be at the end of the block. He then took a right, and that was the wrong way too. He did this on purpose. So I don't know why I was shocked when Will Smith got up from his seat that night and slapped Chris Rock. And surely, the crack that Chris Rock had just made wasn't the sort of joke that one risks his reputation or his career for. But these are now the times of our lives. Anybody could snap, even a man who was once one of the earth's most beloved humans, even a man who, before he left his seat and swung, was poised to enjoy one of the happiest and highest moments of his 53 years. And to top it all off, the show wanted to settle back into its routine after Smith seemed to calm himself. That was shocking too, because the show just went on. Now, I tend to take it even farther. I agree. What we have been experiencing as a society and a global humanity is a sort of sara'at of the soul. We have all been undone one way or another. We have all paid some sort of price, if not individually, then collectively. Look at the rising costs of everything, everywhere. It feels surreal. It's like the Twilight Zone. Every time I go to Costco and I look at the lines and I look at the prices, and Costco's less than other places. And then I go into Los Angeles and I see the prices going upwards of $7 a gallon. I went into a regular coffee store that's a national chain the other day, and I asked for half and half in my coffee, and they asked me, how much? I said, half and half, a little bit, put it in my coffee. And they said, like a smidge, or do you really want some half and half? I said, well, I'm getting a regular in a tall cup, a larger one for ice and half. And they're like, we're going to have to charge you 85 cents more. And they said, you need to know from now on, unless you just want a drop of half and half, it's going to be 85 cents more. And we're required to tell all of our customers that starting April 1st, prices will go up 50 cents to $1 a cup. This is insane. Everything is out of control. What the world saw with Will Smith was a piece of humanity coming undone at the seams, robbing what should have been a glorious moment for him, and not just him, the movie industry as a whole, of the glory in return, in coming back. Just like Sarat, when you've been sent out of the community, coming back. Instead, shining a glaring spotlight on just how far we have yet to come. Sadly, Will Smith has to be the vehicle for the message. I'm not condoning what he did, but just like God hardening Pharaoh's heart in the story that we will recount 2 weeks from tonight, there are things we can control and there are things we cannot. Ultimately, it is how we respond that matters and sets the bar for all to see. God wanted us to see the wonders, to be present as much in the Passover story as God was absent in the Purim story, showing that we can take charge of our own choices and our destiny and prevail in the fight of good over evil. And if we can't, God will show us, shining a light so bright that we cannot choose to not see. Ultimately, our own redemption rests on our willingness to go forward with faith, to do the right thing. It shouldn't be so difficult, and behave in ways most high when we feel most low, desperate, and afraid. God is with us, and the ultimate outcome rests on us, our choices, our behavior, and our faith. Sometimes the end result is not what we see or even want, but it can turn out so much better when looking back in hindsight. Has anyone ever experienced that? The lesson here in our Parsha and the ultimate connection is that we are supposed to act and treat each other with dignity, honor, and respect. And when we don't, affliction of many forms happens to our possessions, to the things we covet, and yes, eventually to us. At the beginning of this new month, let us not be fools and foolish. It is, by the way, April 1st. And with the onset of this new year, where we will soon sit at our Seder tables, creating order with our Haggadah, reading the story of our liberation from slavery, let us look at all that enslaves us, all that causes dis-ease and affliction, so we don't become diseased and pass the point of no return. We are not much different than our ancestors of old. We need to mind ourselves, lest afflictions get the best of us and run riot over all we hold dear. Peace comes at a price. Peace of mind, peace in our homes, peace in our relationships, peace in our souls. Our job is to do right and live right so that the cost does not outweigh the reward. As we forge ahead through this Shabbat and beyond, let us figure out what we can do to be better and merit the good fortune that God ordains for us at this, the head of our new year. Let the bounty in our walls of our own being be easily accessible and not necessitate affliction to uncover our hidden assets. Let what we have be enough to share and the burden not too great to bear. Let kindness of thought, word, and action be our guide so that peace, redemption, and renewal can be had for everyone and the ultimate promise that God had planned. Let us think about the times we behaved in ways or made decisions that reflected less than our best, and then what the outcome was. Let us think about ways we might have harmed another in word, thought, or deed. Let us think about ways in which our heart, our soul, or body might have become afflicted and how we handled it. Was it a natural, uncontrollable course of nature? Or was it brought on by anger, stress, selfishness, or a source that begets sara'at? We all need to move past these years of darkness and go forward into the light. We need to release the chains that bind us, but we cannot do it if we are still, in so many ways, hanging on to them. Let us move forward toward being truly free, as God intended, free from blemish, free from pain, free from all that enslaves us. Let us merit the vindication of the Kohen's pronouncement that the sara'at has passed, so that we can fully return to dwell in community once again. Let this be so for our humble community of Temple Emet and the world as a whole. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. Shabbat Shalom.